We'll politely ask that we have all questions at the end, just so we don't distract anyone while they're speaking. And if you can type them into the chat, we will read them out and we'll answer as many as we can. If we don't get a chance to get to your question, we will try and respond to the written ones in our comms following this. But by all means, follow up afterwards if you do have specific questions. So we'll hand over to Lou.
Thanks, Alfie. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see everyone here today. For anyone I haven't met, my name's Lou. I have been within the digital planning programme for almost 3 years now. My role is kind of joint head of PropTech in collaboration with the lovely Bridget Wilkins, who is also here with us today on camera. So we're going to be talking through a little bit about government's emerging ambitions and why the digital planning programme was set up and how it has grand ambitions to take forward some of this exciting work moving into the future. So just to touch very briefly on Labour's ambitions, we have increasingly seen planning coming to the forefront of some of the ambitions for economic growth that this government has, and seeing planning and particularly housing at the top of the agenda for how to progress and move forward with these ambitious targets that have been set through the manifesto and onwards. We're very excited to kind of have that mandate set, and it really sets a brilliant precedent for our programme and for the PropTech Innovation Fund itself to continue proving the value of how PropTech can accelerate outcomes in housing and planning, and working with brilliant partners across local government, industry, academia and beyond to think about how we get other people on this bus with us and really continue to scale adoption of digital tools that can support the wider plan making process and get those homes built. On the next slide, I think we're talking a little bit about the digital planning programme, so I'll let Bridget touch briefly on our vision and we'll continue to tag team between us.
Thanks, Lou. Just checking everyone can hear me. Okay, fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to join this session, and I think really bring a lot of this vision for the digital planning programme to life. Many of you have seen us talk about this vision and this mission for change, and as Lou mentioned, you know, we think it's a really exciting moment to align that with some wider policy and political ambitions and manifestos, and of course link that into some of the amazing insights we're going to hear today about round 4 and land supply and delivery that really do bring this vision forward around what a 21st century modern data-driven planning system could be. And again, round 4 is just one of the examples of where we're trying to bring that vision to life and to bring you all into what that could be for a variety of stakeholders across the planning ecosystem and network. Next slide, please. I think many of you have seen this before. It's really how we've structured our program and work around enabling faster and more efficient planning decisions, ensuring local authorities and the wider network have better access to planning data, ensuring that the work that is coming through in local areas supports an improved level of community engagement. And of course, this translates into simpler, faster and more accessible plan making. And again, we think round 4 speaks to these opportunities and speaks to these outcomes. And we're excited to share some of that with you this afternoon. Lou, I'll hand to you.
Thank you. So I think this is our final slide. We just wanted to highlight the kind of funding streams that we currently have live through the digital planning programme, one of which, of course, is the PropTech Innovation Fund, currently focused on round 4, which is what today is all about showcasing. And I'm really, really excited to get into the detail of some of that because there is such a huge range of projects in there doing a really diverse range of things and have already shown some incredible outcomes after just kind of 9-10 months of work. So we're really excited that that funding round allowed us to prove the value of PropTech beyond just digital citizen engagement, but also into processes including land assessment, visualization, biodiversity net gain, and many other areas of policy priorities across this government that we know are really, really important to helping unlock a kind of transformed system moving forward. So we're very excited to get into some of that. We also have our brilliant digital planning improvement fund, and that is running in round 2 at the moment. In that fund, we're really helping local authorities with funding and support that will allow them to adopt more modern planning practices within those kind of data capability spaces that Bridget touched on just now, as well as development management. So I think we'll touch a little bit more on next steps for that at the end of the session, because there's an exciting kind of other option for funding streams there. But for now, I'll pass back to Alfie, who will carry on with the brilliant round 4 work.
Thank you, ladies. Yes, so I'll take us through a few more of the details. So You just met Bridget and Lou, but this slide just sort of demonstrates the size of the team that we have behind this work. We've been growing, and there's actually another member that joined this week that isn't even on this slide yet, so we're growing that quickly. But yeah, there's a lot of manpower behind the stuff that we're about to show you. So kind of looking back at some of the work that we've done previously, the Innovation Fund has been going for a few years now, starting in December 2021. Sort of you can see there that we started off quite sort of specific in terms of the goals, digital engagement in statutory planning. And as the rounds have progressed, so have the topics that we've covered. And with that has come some really brilliant outputs and some themes that have started to emerge. So we've gone all the way through to including lands and sites. Behind those rounds are some really impressive numbers in terms of 102 pilots working with 68 local authorities, 58 tech companies, 10 universities, and £13 million worth of funding. All stats that we're really, really proud of. Andy, if you don't mind, thank you. Looking at round 4 more specifically, we have 49 local authorities that we're working with, doing 37 pilots. And when we say pilots, we mean projects. So they're out there sort of testing a solution, seeing what works, what doesn't. How can they start solving some of the problems that we're seeing local authorities up and down the country face? Helping them do that is 30 different suppliers. So it's a really interesting way of working with the private market as well. And they've had between 9 and 12 months to do this work. So what you'll be seeing today is a sort of snapshot of time. They still have a little bit longer on these projects, but it's really important for us to discuss how things go along the way and sort of touch base and see what can be accomplished in this time. The LPAs that we have working with us this year have been split into themes and gone into 3 different cohorts. This is so that they're chatting to people that are working on similar projects to them, so they can be learning from each other and really swap experiences along the way. Thank you, Andy. And it's obviously not just about working with local authorities either, or those wonderful suppliers that are helping them. It's about engaging a wider ecosystem as well. So this is our opportunity to work with different partners and look at things like optimizing skill shares and start to fill in some of those skill deficits. A lot of this stuff is brand new, and sort of learning how to adopt it and run with it is really important. We're also looking to leverage local research and development and exploring new approaches on how to do this stuff as well. And like I mentioned a second ago, really starting to pool our insights in these regions as well. There's a lot of lessons learned from each other, and we're constantly working out the best way to tackle this stuff. And ultimately, we want to be able to scale these interventions. These local authorities are being brilliant and being the ones to try it, but we need to start seeing benefits that everyone can sort of feel and start to really spread the good work. So just to boil some of this down into some numbers. So what we asked all the LPAs at the start of this process to do was to record some qualitative information. So how long was it taking them to do this stuff? And I won't read every number on this slide out, but I will give everyone a second just to read it, because it's really important to start benchmarking this work, so we can then start to understand the impact once it's finished. Are we realistically saving time and money and energy that goes into doing these tasks? And that's the stuff that we can really then sell back in terms of returns on investment and internal buy-in, and sort of making sure that this stuff really sticks and everyone starts to feel the wider benefit of it. So these numbers come from the digital citizen engagement pilots. Andy, if I can ask you to go on to the next one. We also did the same with the land assessment. So obviously land assessment stuff is slightly newer for us. So we've carried out the same exercise in terms of asking our local authorities to monitor how long it was taking them using traditional methods, so we can sense check what we're doing afterwards. Hopefully, once this round is finished in the next couple of months, these are all numbers that we'll be able to compare and share with you again, so you can see what the before and after of these projects really look like in terms of time and money. But I am the one standing between you and the LPAs, so I will wrap up there and I will pass you on to Terry. Are you with us, Terry?
I am here.
Excellent.
Can you hear me? Can you see me? Yeah, cool. Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
No
Yeah, hi everyone. Yes, I'm Terry D'Souza. I am a team leader in the planning policy and strategy team at Greater Cambridge Shared Planning Service. just going to give you a quick update on where we are with one of our PropTech projects at the moment. So we've actually got 3 on the go. So slightly on the naughty step. We're still heavily involved in PropTech 3. That's still ongoing and actually getting some good outputs of that at the moment. We've got another project on PropTech 4 looking at biodiversity net gain and how you monitor that, and that's going really well. But specifically, the project that I've been working with colleagues is looking at how we can streamline our sites process. So that starts all the way from the call for sites all the way through to identifying sites and then allocation. So just a quick overview about who we are. So we're a shared planning service between Cambridge City and South Cambridgeshire District Council. We're quite a large planning service, about 150 people, and it's around 28 of us in the planning policy and strategy team at the moment. And we've got real significant development pressures in our area. I'm sure people are broadly aware, but lots of different industries in our area driving up homes and jobs. And so therefore, in our emerging local plan, we're looking at around 52,000 new homes, around 60,000 new jobs. And from the last 2 consultations we did on our emerging local plan, we got about 9,500 reps to both consultations. So lots of interest developer-wise and lots of interest government-wise and lots of interest from our local communities as well. So the starting point. So sites. We launched a call for sites in 2019 and we were probably a really good example of how not to do it. We were really not set up to handle data. Very much traditional, send out a PDF, put it on your website and expect everybody to submit it in a way that you hope they will. And of course that never happens. So we got a whole bunch of sites in 2019 and then more sites came in during the first consultation in 2020 and then even more in the first proposals consultation in 2021. So in total, we've had about 750 sites submitted to us through the call for sites. And as people be aware through planning practice guidance, we also have to find our own sites as well. We can't just rely on those submitted to us by agents and promoters and landowners. So we've looked at around 250 sites off our own back. So in total, we're up to 1,001 sites that we've assessed. And I already know there were more coming for future rounds of consultation. So some of these aren't just new sites as well that people obviously don't agree with the assessments that you've done previously, so they submit more representations, more data, more reassessments of sites, things change, boundaries change, quantums change. So it's a continuous cycle of assessments and outputs and things. So in terms of how we've undertaken our site assessments, every site's been assessed consistently. Initially starts off with a desktop analysis, so that's a lot of GIS-based work. And then we get technical expertise from 8 separate teams. So ecology, landscape, conservation, county highways, archaeology. So trying to get sites, one site assessed by 8 separate different teams, in addition to all of the desktop analysis we do, again, just generates more and more data. And as I said, we were not really set up to handle that data. So we thought, well, why don't we just put it all in Excel? Because, where else would you put it? And Excel really isn't designed to handle this quantum of data. So at the moment, we have a spreadsheet that has around 320,000 populated cells of information. I don't even think Excel is set up to handle that. So yeah, it's quite astonishing. And as I said, if one site and they want it, someone wants to say, well, I don't agree with your landscape assessment, and they submit a representation on that, adds another column, because that site then gets reassessed by the landscape officers and it just rolls on and on and on. The other thing that we do is we then report out of this. So we actually run a very complicated mail merge to put this into a Word document so that we can actually publish the healer on our website. Again, a mail merge is not designed to cope with this kind of volume of data, but it just kind of shows that, we kind of just made do with what we had at that point in time and the kind of capacity and capabilities within our team. So we're a really good example of how not to do it, I think. So yeah, it's been an interesting last few years. So how's PropTech help? So PropTech's been incredibly helpful from that point from that point of view. So first thing we did is a data discovery. So we had TPX Impact come in and do a data discovery, which kind of mapped out the end-to-end process mapping of what we do. One of the things that it highlighted was that there's a real high risk of errors, which kind of goes without saying, really, when you see spreadsheets like that. A lot of that's managed by one person within the team. He's a GIS data technician. So he does all of the desktop analysis, also manages the spreadsheet, also helps with kind of doing that incredibly difficult mail merge. So really that's one point of failure, which is really not very good for sort of business planning moving forward. It's unmanageable and completely unsustainable. So what we then did is looked at how we can get a smarter solution to this problem. I'm sure there's lots of other people on the call who are already working with urban intelligence, but through the PropTech 4 funding, we got urban intelligence on board because we thought that actually that was quite a useful tool to help manage all of this. So we're not using urban intelligence for the consultation. We've got a separate consultation platform that we use. But in terms of that kind of storing that data, managing that data, getting other assessors to kind of collaborate and do their assessments in one place rather than sending spreadsheets back and forward via email, it's quite a useful tool for that. Also in terms of reporting as well, no mail merges hopefully will be involved moving forward, so that'll be great. So that data migration is in process. As you can imagine, trying to migrate 320,000 populated cells worth of data into a platform, it is quite a task in its own right. So we're not quite there at the moment. We're trying to get there by the end of this calendar year. It might creep into January, but yeah. So we'll see how we go with that one. But we're really excited to be moving onto a new platform, and hopefully that will also help us moving forward with our Gypsy and Traveller site assessments as well, because you can kind of customize the assessment process in Urban Intelligence to suit different housing needs. So yeah, so we're quite excited about that. So PropTech 4 has been really helpful from that perspective. This, you won't be able to read it, but this kind of just maps out the end-to-end process mapping that TPX did for us, which shows on the far top left-hand corner when a site comes into us, all the way through to all of the different assessors, the internal mapping, the desktop assessments, all the way through to selecting sites that we think best align with our local plan strategy, through to the very last box on the top right, which is essentially drafting a local plan allocation. So lots of steps, and I'm sure we're not the only council that goes through that pain. The other thing that we've really struggled with is site capacity testing. So sites, as you all know, they're not straightforward. They're a complex mix of land uses, typologies, densities, heights, infrastructure, open space, a lot. And we've really struggled with trying to do that on some of our bigger, more complicated strategic sites. So we thought, how can we use our new Cambridge 3D model to help site capacity testing? So we've recently acquired Esri to do us a 3D model for Cambridge. It's quite large. It's about 120 square kilometres of the city and the surrounding area. And that's been kind of in development in the background outside of the PropTech projects. But we thought, how can we utilize a tool that is traditionally used for DM purposes, dealing with pre-apps and that kind of thing? So I suppose the starting point, for some reason, it always comes back to Excel. So, for example, one of the sites that I've been dealing with for an area action plan in the northeast part of the city had to do lots of scenario testing for that site. There's probably about 7 different landowners for that site, all with different aspirations. And I always think that sometimes when you're doing site capacity testing, it's a bit like jelly. You push one bit down, another bit pops up. But it becomes really tricky because infrastructure provision is based typically on the number of people. So if you have 9,000 homes, well, that might be 2 primary schools and a secondary school, but you do 9,001 homes and suddenly you might need another secondary school, but you don't have the land take for that because you've only you've only changed it by 1 unit. And so it becomes really difficult and you end up just doing scenario after scenario in Excel with lots of complicated formulas that underpin it. And again, it's really difficult. And we thought, well, there's it. So on the next slide, we again thought, how can we use the PropTech to help us with this? So we have been working with Esri on a add-on to our 3D digital model, and it's called Urban. And it's been it's still early days again, so this is still very much in development. So apologies that if you're expecting to see some whizzy fancy thing ready to go, we're not quite there yet, but we're on the journey. And essentially building on some of the work that others have done, like Nottingham, using kind of standard typologies to help undertake massing testing for our emerging allocations. So using kind of nationally described space standards, different types of land uses and typologies within those, whether it's wet and dry labs, masonettes, tower blocks, whatever, generating different development yields based on different scenarios. We can then create. We're looking to create like an infrastructure assumption tool into this kind of urban software. So essentially, what it does is you can generate your massing. You can put in what type of housing or land use typology you want to use. That would generate kind of population numbers based on average number of occupants per dwelling in our area. That then tells you what your infrastructure requirements will be. And what you can then do is start to play around with it. So, like I said, if you've got 9,000 homes, well, what does that mean in terms of open space provision, school provision, community facilities? Do you have the land budget to actually do that? If you start playing around, sliding the scale up and down, what does that mean in terms of that infrastructure provision? So you're doing capacity testing, creating different scenarios in a 3D way, which is really, really helpful. So we've still got a bit of a way to go in terms of the journey. So in terms of the next steps, the first thing is we've got three pilot sites on the go at the moment that we're looking to test this infrastructure assumption tool, capacity testing tool in, and that's ongoing. So we've got a mixed use central Cambridge site, a larger kind of 5,500 site on the edge of Cambridge, and then potentially a strategic scale development further on the edge of Cambridge, which is probably around 9,000 to 10,000 new homes and the same number of jobs. So really kind of different ends of the scale, seeing how we can use this tool. As I said, we're trying to do the data transfer into Placemaker, the urban intelligence tool. And we're also expanding our 3D model as well to cover Cambourne. So Cambourne is potentially a new stop on the East-West rail line. And again, trying to use all of these digital tools and to inform plan making on that side. What we want is to then use those digital outputs to inform public consultation on our site allocations in the new plan. We're hoping to go out with our draft plan this time next year. So hopefully being able to actually show people things in 3D. We've never actually done that before in Greater Cambridge. I think that would really, really try and we'll probably end up getting more representations, which is no bad thing. But also in terms of our site assessments, at the moment, all of our site assessments sitting around 5,000 pages of PDFs. It's really inaccessible to anyone. So, if you're a member of local community and want to know what the site assessment was for anything in your area, it's really difficult to find it. Whereas we want to, make it much more interactive through dashboards and things like that. So that's kind of where we are. And that feels like the kind of easy bit. The next bit's the really challenging bit. So what we're trying to do is how can we possibly integrate or get these different pieces of software to talk to each other so you can kind of reduce the manual handling by officers. I had a really good workshop a couple of weeks ago with JDI, who do our consultation platform, Urban Intelligence, who do the database, and Esri with the 3D model, to see how we can start to be a little bit more clever really in terms of that kind of modular approach to dealing with data. So how do we get the site data from the promoters from JDI into Urban Intelligence? How can we get some of the promoters to submit sites in 3D? Because they do all of their kind of promotions in 3D, some of these big sites. How do we get that from them and use it straight into our 3D model? How can we make sure the outputs from the assessments from in the Urban Intelligence software can talk to the Esri model and the urban add-on and those kinds of things? So we want to make sure that we're reducing the manual handling. One, it saves officer time, but two, it just reduces the risk for error. So this is the challenging bit, and this is the bit that I think will probably creep into next PropTech projects. It almost feels a bit like it takes a little while to gain momentum. There's always kind of capacity and procurement issues to start with. We do have a bit of momentum with the project now, which is really good, but we felt that, again, it's always about kind of breaking it down into small steps, because sometimes smaller steps rather than a kind of a big leap into the unknown is better. And yeah, I feel like we're heading in the right direction. It's just, yeah, we know that there's some difficult, challenging kind of technical bits to come, but yeah, we're quite excited by the possibilities. But yeah, that's it from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Terry. That was brilliant. Just a reminder that we are going to tackle the questions at the end, just to make sure that everyone gets their chance to speak. But yeah, fantastic, Terry. Thank you. And I will pass over to Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Alfie. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Phil Hilton. I'm the local plans manager for Central Lincolnshire, and we joined PropTech community in round 4. So we're actually relatively new in a block and probably a bit earlier in the journey. So first, I'll give you a very brief introduction to Central Lincolnshire, as I'm sure it's an alien area for most people. We're located in the East Midlands, tucked away to the east of the A1 and the East Coast Main Line, to give you some broad context. Central Lincolnshire is the local planning authority for joint planning area, which covers the City of Lincoln Council and also West Lindsey and North Kesteven districts. And the partnership also includes the County Council. Our current local plan looks to facilitate 30,000 new homes, so again, it's quite a significant area of growth, and obviously associated employment and infrastructure. The context Central Links also presents some of the biggest challenges for the area. Now, the first of which is probably the shared function across the separate councils. Each have their own DM functions and their own systems. They also have their own politics and priorities, but the partnership generally is pretty strong and makes this work quite successfully. The large rural nature of the area as well is quite a barrier for achieving engagement in particular. So the area itself is more than 200,000 hectares, or about 817 square miles. And further, as with many local authorities these days, we have to operate with a small local planning policy team. So we've just got 5 people, so quite a bit fewer than Greater Cambridgeshire. We don't have a GIS officer in-house either, which is another barrier. Another barrier for engaging and planning in our area is the existing systems that we had in the team, both for GIS and other functions. And similar to the example we've just seen, lots of different Excel spreadsheets, lots of different tools, none of which really talk to each other, and it's quite disconnected. If we go to the next slide, please. So our project had the snappy title of the Central Lincolnshire Integrated Mapping, Planning and Engagement System. So the goals of the new system were threefold, really. The first one being improving how we engage across the area, and that's not only in terms of the geography, reaching people in both rural and urban areas, but also improving the reach to ensure it's representative of our varied communities across the area. We also want to improve a number of our planning processes, driving efficiencies. This is something we recognise is going to be needed with the new proposed 30-month timetable for local plans, particularly with such a small team. Finally, we wanted to strengthen the partnership work and improve the consistency of what we present to the public. So we investigated a number of tools to use for our system, and we eventually settled on using Esri's ArcGIS, again similar to the last speaker. And we proposed to test this primarily on the authority-wide design code, which we're currently preparing. Next slide, please. So I'll quickly cover our timetable since we started on the project. So whilst we started discussions with various potential suppliers earlier, we actually started the formal procurement process back in March 2024. And we used the Vertical Application Solutions Framework, for anyone familiar with that, for our procurement. We used VAS, as it's known, as it allowed us to have 3 years for the purchase. So we felt that would ensure proper commitment to the tool rather than then reviewing and changing it within 2 years or shorter. And that was going to be an efficient tool to secure the new tool. Even though we used the VAS framework, it did take until late May to actually get the purchase of the licenses and get them in place. So it's a bit longer than expected. We did secure temporary licenses throughout the procurement process, so that allowed us to familiarise ourselves with the tools, to help to prepare for the work we need to start doing on it, and also to understand the licenses and add-ons we might want us to buy. When we had the licenses, we immediately started the onboarding process. That was about June, with formal training for officers both in my team and at the other districts. And at the same time, we also started to set up the system for our design code project. And that included some internal surveys, production of maps, that type of thing. We held our first consultation in September. This was delayed from what we expected, partly due to the election and the summer holidays, and also because it took longer to actually get the system set up. We're currently reviewing those responses, ready to feed into the next stages of the design code and to feed back publicly as well. And as you can see on the chart, The onboarding process has continued since June. I'm still upskilling staff. So far, we've done about 18 officers across the districts to use the system for their various functions, and are currently developing a support group across the partnership so we can make sure we continue to use it consistently. Next slide, please. So far, the local plans teams used ArcGIS Hub to set up a new web page. There's a screenshot of it on the page there. We've uploaded the local plan and we've created an interactive local plan policies map. We've also hosted information on the new design code, and the core engagement activities have been hosted on the site. So we intend to increase the functions of the site to create a one-stop shop for all things planning, or plan making specifically. Next slide, please. We've also used a number of tools available to authorities being used using basic ArcGIS online. So a key thing we wanted to achieve was not having to pay for add-ons, but using the core functionality. Is the video working, or is that just black for me? Oh, there we go, wonderful. So we've used a number of the tools, one of which being the story maps function in ArcGIS, which many of you will be familiar with already. We used it to introduce design codes to users as it's a new tool, a new part of the policy suite. We found it really easy to set up, and it allowed us to create a clear narrative that was intuitively laid out about design codes. We included embedding images and videos in the story and made it very accessible. And we intend to develop our skills in story maps further and use them for various functions going forward. Next slide, please. Another free tool in ArcGIS is Survey 123. So as part of our new engagement strategy, we intended to use more surveys to engage, and in different ways to what we've done previously. And Survey 123, for anyone not familiar with it, it's quite similar to other survey tools on the market, but it links directly into your system and your mapping. So it's got numerous other functions that we didn't have access to previously. So for example, one of the surveys on the design code sought examples of good or bad design, and people were able to drop pins on maps for their locations and upload images to illustrate their examples. So we created 3 surveys in all and undertook in-person events and targeted publicity to try and get people engaged on the new system and to register for future consultations. Next slide, please. The consultation's proven, I think, to be successful, particularly given the subject matter was quite conceptual and doesn't tend to attract much interest from people. It tends to be when bulldozers come out into fields that people get riled and come in masses. But we had 460 responses in total, and these have come from a good geographic spread, as is shown on that map. The respondents included substantially more residents than we usually have, which is a real win for us. And I think it's fair to say there was a wider representation from our younger population so far. So they're 2 good wins, but we're still understanding precisely the nature of the responses and whether we have hit our goals of actually getting a good cross section. I think probably most importantly about what we've achieved is that we had really good information coming forward to direct our work on the design code. So we're currently working through that to see where we go next. Next slide, please. I think it's another one to press play on, hopefully. So beyond the consultation, we've also used dashboards, which is another free tool to those using ArcGIS Online. So these are interactive information boards to allow people to interrogate data about our area. We've set up 4 so far, 1 on population, 1 on housing and economy and travel to work, and we intend to continue this development. The feedback on these dashboards have been really positive so far, so people no longer have to read reams of information to see the key messages, and they can focus on what's important to them. And this is just an example of sort of the power of the data you can get from this tool relatively simply. Next slide, please. And partnership, that was a key part of our bid. So far we've onboarded 18 officers, as I say, across the partner authorities, and we're getting more interest from other teams. The work ArcGIS is being used for across the partnership both includes our design code baseline analysis, and we've also teamed up with the University of Lincoln Geography Department in getting student placements and potentially having modules that will be based on working with us to support our work. Wider across the partnership, they're using it for the production of state of the district reports, a new city centre master plan for Lincoln, tree planting strategy, climate change vulnerability mapping, and there's more projects coming forward all the time. And we're building a business case for further use of the tool across the authorities to deliver more joint working, in the hope that it will lead to skill sharing, collaboration and more efficiencies. Next page, please. So looking forward, we'll continue to embed the system and we're looking for new ways to utilise it. We're developing efficiencies for what we can do in plan making and other functions. And we'll also continue to develop the business case and further collaboration. And this will hopefully change how our authorities operate, progressing on our digital journey. On the collaboration front, we're using our Hub Premium, which is not the standard hub that comes with the tool, but we've paid a bit of an extra for that. And that's allowing us to work with more officers at the districts, giving them access to the tools. And so far, we're finding that Hub Premium could be really useful to making ArcGIS accessible to partner authorities and develop the share workflows. I also intend to use it to secure a GIS resource, hopefully, in a local plans team, and that will hopefully be one that we can use across the wider partnership going forwards. Next slide, please. So it's always good to reflect on what you've done. So the project's been a journey so far, and we've learned a lot. However, we are very early in the journey. The VAS framework, so looking at procurement first, I would say it's a good procurement tool. It's fairly quick to purchase tools, but you need more time than maybe you expect to set it up because you have to actually get the product that you need on there. Setup and onboarding also took longer than expected. A lot of the tools in ArcGIS are very simple to use, but if you want to get the best out of them, you need to devote the time and resource to do that. Arranging time with a lot of teams to arrange onboarding has also proved challenging, but I say we're getting in now, and I think more and more benefits are being realised. It would have been greatly beneficial also to have the GIS officer throughout the work. That would deliver greater efficiency and get the most out of the tool, and this includes procurement. So we found there's possibly a bit of gap in dialogue between our team and the supplier. So having somebody who can bridge that gap would be really useful to make sure we get the right licenses and the add-ons that we actually needed to purchase. As for the tool itself, ArcGIS Online is a fantastic off-the-shelf tool. It can do so much more than just GIS. I think that's probably the biggest surprise to a lot of my colleagues when I've started talking about ArcGIS. They turned off, but when they actually saw what it could do, they started to get quite excited. And whilst we're quite early on our journey, particularly when you compare us to the great work by others in PropTech, I think our project shows what you can achieve in a relatively short time from a very basic starting point. I think all you really need is an ambitious approach to this and probably securing buy-in from the right people at your organisation or organisations in a partnership. And a good GIS resource can also help, but I think that ambition is really key to make sure you can take your organisations forward. But I'll happily answer any questions in the chat if anyone has any interest, but that's our project in a nutshell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Yeah, I will pass over to Catherine and then we'll hopefully tackle some of these questions at the end, but that was brilliant. Thank you. Catherine, are you with us?
There we are. Yes, hopefully you can
Awesome.
hear me now. Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'm Catherine Radzivonik, Principal Development Manager at Reigate and Banstead Borough Council. So we're a district council stretching from the south of London down to the West Sussex border in the south of England, and the four main towns within Reigate and Banstead, for those people who don't know, are Banstead, Redhill, Reigate and Hawley. I'm part of the place delivery team there. It's a very small team of 4 of us who are working on capital delivery, regeneration and placemaking in the borough. And one of our core objectives in our emerging development strategy is to develop a stock of council-owned and genuinely affordable rented homes for local people. What the PropTech funding has enabled us to do is to acquire site assessment software, training and expertise to fast track the first part of that process to deliver new homes, and that's to identify a pipeline development programme, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. So next slide. So the approach that we followed is really covered by 4 stages. Prior to the PropTech funding being announced, we were completing a high-level asset review of all of the council assets to identify which of those might have development potential. And that ranged from brownfield and greenfield sites to very small parcels of land and much larger agricultural areas of land as well. So a vast amount of sites, and we narrowed that down to about 80 or so potentials within the borough. The second stage which is what PropTech allowed us to do, is to apply for funding to trial site assessment software that could move those 80 or so sites forward to form a pipeline delivery programme. So we procured Vestiga, which is a site modelling platform, and we also procured a programme of onboarding, upskilling and training of officers and supporting technical advice from 3110. And we'll be having a demonstration of Vestiga very shortly. So the third stage, which is really the core of the work that we've been doing, is the analysis and the refinement of that long list to form a shorter list of sites and to complete site assessments. So what we've done as a team, with collaborating with 3110, is to migrate all the data that we'd collected as part of the high-level asset review onto Vestiga. We've had a long process internally of agreeing standard assumptions and bespoke Reigate and Banstead inputs to go into the baseline appraisal model that sits behind all of the site viability assessments. And then we run scenarios with different tenure mixes and delivery options. So our go-to starting point is really for 100% affordable homes on our schemes. So that's one of the mixes that we put in, as well as a policy compliant tenure mix, and different delivery options such as direct delivery. That's our first starting point, or disposal or joint ventures, and looking at what the data tells us in relation to each of those different options. From that, we get a range of different site reports that we can use the data to refine the list. And we've gone from 80 sites, we went down to 40 initially, and now we're down to 20 or so sites which are on the short list to move to stage 4, which is really the portfolio approach. So that's about consolidating the sites into a cohesive programme, moving away from that site-based approach to stepping back and having that broad visual at a programme level. That allows us to further test different scenarios and to sequence the programme, and to really look at how we might be able to unlock sites by those sites working effectively together to form a sustainable and deliverable programme. Have we gone to next slide? Thank you. So just touching briefly on the benefits of the approach. So we found this hugely beneficial, having the PropTech funding to help us through this process. What we've been able to do is move from, have a consistent approach. So all of our assets are reviewed using standardized assumptions. So we've got a really consistent and clear view of our sites. We're able to input specific bespoke strategic priorities into the model. So Vestiga enables us to shape and frame what we want to see in the appraisals that are coming out. So we know we want to maximise the delivery of affordable homes. So that's in there as standard. We know that we want to go beyond policy in terms of higher environmental standards. So that's embedded in the model too. We have that comprehensive review. As I mentioned, we can step back. It enables us to have a coordinated and planned approach to delivery in a way that we didn't have before. And also we can look at the spread visually in terms of the geographical delivery of homes across the borough. Make sure we're not just building in one area, but really spreading that across, spreading the load, as it were. In terms of efficiency, it's hugely efficient. The model has helped us to expedite and streamline what was actually a very slow desktop-based process that we were completing alongside our other project capital delivery. So this has enabled us to move forward quite swiftly with developing a pipeline programme. In terms of financial sustainability, which is a really key feature of the work that we're doing, trying to overcome issues that we've had in terms of viability. So again, it's being able to look at individual sites and that portfolio level, and to be able to look at funding profiling, revenue, capital requirements, impacts, and again, putting all the information that we have in relation to sites into that modelling software. And some sites that may not be independently viable work within the portfolio, because we can start to batch sites together and start to cross-subsidise each other, and to look at different methods to unlock sites that otherwise traditionally would have dropped out of a programme. So that's a really big benefit to us. And then finally, before we move on to the demo, just in terms of scenario testing, and to reiterate, really, this is a dynamic process that we follow. So we're always modelling and sequencing options, and can refine the model at all levels to construct a balanced pipeline. So it really reflects land availability, programme, financial requirements and resourcing needs. And at that point, I I think next slide, we're handing over to 3110, and Gary O'Connell is going to provide us with a demonstration of Vestiga and what it can do.
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, we're going to take you through a demo of some non-Reigate sites just to demonstrate kind of the process we took to build up that 40-site portfolio that Catherine went through. So the process started at actually identifying and loading up those 40 sites. So if you can look at the map now, we can see that we're looking through sites. We're toggling on and off different layers to get a feel for the constraints that each of the sites had. So looking at listed buildings, open space conservation areas, and then where Reigate and Banstead is, the green belt was a particular point of interest. So we went through all of the sites that they provided us. We loaded them up. And then you can see this is just modeling that you can double click into the sites, or you can draw bespoke land boundaries. And then what we did is we ran this, click run, and we put the site names in, the information that we got from Reigate and Banstead, whether they're landowners, some key information around the net developable space, any benchmark land values, initial views on flats versus houses, urban, and then a cost setting. And then when we run this, what it's doing is it effectively collected data and then produced a site level view that we're looking at right now. So this is where for each of those 40 sites, we went through and started at the site manager page where we started to collect information from the council. As Catherine mentioned, there was a range of information that was across various databases, such as land ownership, asset type, existing use, any income from tenants on site, and development considerations, so restrictions, planning. And this was a place that we could collate that information to one single place. We then paired that with some of the analytics that the app produced. So this gets information such as GIS layer information, town centers, local rail stations, demographic data. But most importantly, when looking at viability, it generates a estimated new build rate for market sale. So for this site, it's 9,200, as well as a rental assumption. So it's doing this by tapping into a number of databases, namely Land Registry and the EPC. So you can see this graph is looking at the local comparables. It's looking at three different things: existing price paid, uplifted by new build premium, new build price data, and then the new build ads on listing portals. And this is the underlying data that our algorithm uses to estimate what the value is for a new build unit in a site location, which obviously is very specific to that site. And what we also look at, and as Catherine mentioned, a huge objective of using the app is to look at modeling affordable rent, and therefore we have all of the affordable rents automatically generated as well. The other side of the equation for viability is development costs. So we use BCIS API to generate automated build cost estimates for the site. And then we also have a proprietary SIL database that we use. And in Reigate, Banstead has 5 different SIL zones. So this actually automatically works out which zone that was. So that just saves some time in terms of developing the initial appraisals. And then lastly, we looked at high level capacity. So the app is generating data. It's also a software tool, but at this kind of gateway zero, as we call it, there's a automated basis upon which we assume how many flats can go onto that site using local permission data, plot building heights and plot boundaries, as well as P-TEL matrix of the sites within London. What this generated on the first run of these 40 sites was an initial estimate without kind of any human interaction of what the value of that site was and the underlying assumptions. So you can see the assumptions listed out here automatically. So for anyone coming in, this was something that we used with Reigate and Banstead to effectively kind of review collectively, iterate, and then adjust to get to a position where we were happy. And what this gave us was an underlying basis for what the scheme initially looked like, but most importantly, what was the value of that site if it was to be disposed, which is £10.2 million. We looked at a number of things behind that land value, particularly around kind of the impact of tenure. So this helped us formulate some of our strategies around kind of affordable provision and what that impact was to the overall viability of the site. And then we have kind of background appraisals and sensitivity to look at what would happen to that land value if different things were to happen around kind of costs and values. So the next step was going back into the infrastructure. So this is a fully functioning software modeling tool where we can play around with different assumptions. So we could look at 40% affordable, and you can see the land value changes to £11.4 million. So this was part of that kind of initial phase of viability review that we conducted to refine some of the assumptions and get to a position where we were happy. And then you can look at the cost side. We start at very high level. But then what we are working towards now is driving down into the details. So professional fees going from 8% down to individual architect fees and QS and design teams. And now this delivery is based on a kind of assumed disposal to look at the land value. But as Catherine mentioned, the real kind of goal was to look at self-delivering to optimize the amount affordable in the borough. So we've just loaded a scenario now that we looked at where we're delivering 100% affordable through the council as the delivering body. And we've gone through, and as Catherine said, a huge part of this exercise was agreeing operational assumptions ranging from kind of rent setting, voids and bad debt, maintenance, management, life cycle, and so forth, so that we could look at this from a different perspective. And you can see the KPIs at the top have changed as well. So we're looking at kind of NPV, payback period, IRR, and that was another conversation with the council to generate those KPIs. A key one being the payback flex, which you can see is 40 years for this scheme. So we've also used this to calculate the grants needed to unlock some of these sites. And a lot of our analysis in the very beginning was looking at different levels of affordable rent and how much grant would be required to unlock those sites. And then lastly, we looked at the council's position. So obviously, viability from a appraisal standpoint is quite static. It's quite simple. But what we also want to look at is, what are the peak funding requirements? What are the revenue implications and the development funding requirements from the council to deliver that site? So we did that site by site. We ran a number of scenarios within each of those sites, and you can see we've only run 2 in this kind of demo, but we have about 6 or 7 or 8 for each of the sites that we've run with Reigate and Banstead. And what we now are starting to look at, and the phase we're at kind of currently, is starting to look at putting that together. So you can see what this is doing now is it's consolidating all of the sites into an individual program, and you looking at the use of cross subsidy, and looking at kind of funding strategies, revenue impacts, and also service implications. Because as a council, it's not just a matter of redevelopment, it's also looking at if there's any existing income or any kind of service or expenditure savings as a result of redevelopment or regeneration. So if you look at the developer, a good example of cross subsidy is that payback flexible. So within the borough, there's a number of viable and unviable areas. So if you looked at 40 years as a kind of green target for a payback flexible, what we've been doing is looking at the consolidated position. So where site B in this instance is unviable, sites A and C are viable, and sites A and C are less viable. The consolidated cross subsidy position shows a viable position overall. So we're using that to look at using viable sites across subsidized non-viable sites. And then we're also looking at capping the debt borrowing that the council would need to incur to deliver the site. So we're using kind of funding profiles to optimize the funding position and minimize the funding requirement to be able to maximize the amount of units they can deliver while minimizing how much they have to borrow. And then lastly, looking at the revenue impact. So this is where this would be a cross property and finance kind of implication, looking at the long run expenditure of as a result of that development, including maintenance, management, MRP, interest, but then also looking at the rent. So looking at the income into the council. So where we're at right now is we have that, as Catherine said, that 20 site program set, and we're now looking at different delivery methodologies and different programs that are viable and represent a kind of good value for money to the council, and also optimize housing.
Thank you, Gary. Sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you there, just so we have a few minutes for our questions, but thank you.
That's fine, yeah.
Catherine, was there anything you wanted to add just to finish that off?
No, that's fine. I think just to say that obviously we're still developing the programme. We've got some more work to do with Vestiga. We're going to be looking at temporary accommodation within the programme, and then presenting to members and rolling out our development strategy.
Thank you very much. That was great. Obviously, I do have one eye on the time, so I'm going to invite you all just to type in any questions that you have. We will circulate both the PDF of this presentation, the recording, and if we don't get a chance to answer your questions, we'll put it into writing. So do pop it all in there, even if we don't get the chance to verbally answer it now. If I kick off to where we were at the beginning of the session, Simon asked Terry, does the infrastructure provision consider increase in traffic too?
No. So the infrastructure assumption tool is to undertake the kind of big ticket infrastructure items that would take up land within the site. Ultimately, it will give you a kind of a definitive number or a range of capacity for the site, whether that's commercial or residential, and then that would then feed into our emerging transport modelling work that we do with others like the Combined Authority and the County Council. So it's to really identify the site-specific land uses and big ticket infrastructure items, and then that then feeds into other pieces of work like transport modelling, infrastructure delivery plan, all those types of things.
Thank you, Terry. Sorry, I'm going to make sure that everyone gets one question each. So, Phil, for you, would also be interested to hear how these design codes integrate with Objective Key Plan.
I'm not quite sure what that means, Objective Key, but is that a different tool? I'm not sure that was actually meant for me or if that was meant for Terry.
Oh, then I apologise. Okay, Terry, would you mind taking that one, please?
So I think the integration point's an interesting one. So I don't know if I can answer that one specifically, but you know, all of these companies that have developed all of these tools, whether it's Commonplace, Urban Intelligence, whatever, they've created their software, and they can all bring something unique to the market based on what they've done. I suppose they aren't necessarily, I don't think at this point in time, designed to be fully integratable with other pieces of software, because they are commercial entities in their own right and they have commercial interests. So I think that's completely fair enough. What we're trying to do through the PropTech bit, and this is the challenging bit, is to say, well, we don't need to know all of the kind of magic that happens within these pieces of software, but how do we get the key pieces of data to go from one platform to the other? So there are challenges, there are commercial sensitivities, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to find a way through that process to make sure that we can reduce that manual handling, as I mentioned earlier.
Thanks, Terry, and my apologies again for the confusion there. Phil, I can see you've answered Amber's question, so thank you for that. Last one, with the last few seconds that we've got, are there any attempts to facilitate Section 106 negotiations for shortening the time involved? That is for Catherine, I believe.
I don't. Yeah, I'm not sure whether that one is for me. I think that I mean, it could be in relation to thinking about how we do the kind of batching of sites and negotiation with the local planning authority in terms of how we bring forward sites. But yeah, I'm not sure that we don't have Section 106 with ourselves as such, but there is some negotiation to do around how we deliver combined sites and sites that are linked.
Sure. Well, I can see people have to leave us now. So, Andy, if you don't mind just going to the last slide, please. A huge thank you to everyone that's come along today. We really appreciate your time, and obviously a massive thank you to the speakers. Just to let you guys know that as we said at the start of the session, PropTech Innovation Fund, we are inviting everyone in round 4 to apply for top-up funding. So we will have the opportunity to see how these projects can continue with a bit more time and money, and hopefully share some of that really interesting stuff with you later down the line. And there is the opportunity to join the Digital Planning Fund. So you can join the Open Digital Planning community and see how we could help you with the data capabilities and begin a service modernisation. I think we should have the email address on the last slide. If we just go on there, Andy. I will leave you all with that. Like I say, we will circulate these slides so you can take a look at it again. But if you've got any questions, please do email us on that address or visit the website. Thank you all very much. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.